Good morning, Crossroads Nation. This is Skip Nelson, and I'm one of the volunteers here at Crossroads, and we're thrilled to have you with us this morning. Got a lot of wonderful things in store, and I just want you to know that other than being a financial advisor with Thrivent Financial, I am incredibly smart and really astonishingly good looking. The topic today is tactful self-promotion. Sorry, that's not so tactful. So don't listen to what I just said. Nancy will be on later to really help you understand how to tactfully promote yourself, particularly in job transition. I've heard her before. It's a great presentation. You're in for a treat. But from a Crossroads standpoint, we are thrilled that we get numerous new participants every time we get together. And so I just want to make you aware a little bit of some of the things that we have as resources for you in your job transition, of which there are many. I know when I was in job transition, I'd never been through it before. I had started my own company out of college, and I didn't know there were groups out there or even resources for folks in job transition, and there are. And at Grace, we've got many resources. So we'll go through a few of those. There's actually three Crossroad groups. I help out of the one out of Grace Church in Eden Prairie, but there are two others that we also utilize, but we're all getting together during COVID to participate as one. And we're hoping to get back together as soon as possible. I know all of us are looking for any little thing of normalcy that we can get back to. But it looks like we're probably going to stay virtual through the end of the year. But keep in touch through our website and all, and we'll certainly update as soon as that changes. But as I mentioned, we're in treat for the presentation today. I know you're going to get great information out of it. But I wanted to offer a little something of hopefully of encouragement. I know when I was in transition, I found it to be really a tough battle. The process can really beat you up. And I hadn't anticipated that. We think about job transition, and we've got to do interviews, and we've got to do a resume, and just the tactful stuff that we have to do. But I hadn't really thought about the emotional side of it and how the process can really cause self-doubt and make us depressed and frustrated or whatever. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that. And I looked at a book that you might even look at too that I found helpful called Why Did I Lose My Job If God Loves Me? And I know sometimes I like to think I've got strong faith, but there were times where I'm like, well, what's up with this, God? This isn't on my plan here, or it's taking longer than I believe it should. Things aren't always by our own plan. God's timing can be a little different, can it? But there was a Bible verse that I found really helpful in my transition, and it is James 4, 6, 8, and 10. And it says as follows: God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. And again, today's topic is the art of artful self-promotion. And unlike my initial comments, jokingly about myself, that was not humble. And so we want to make sure that we're humble in what we do, but that doesn't mean that we can't promote and be proud of ourselves. So it continues: submit yourselves then to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. The thing I found really important in job transition is to remember that we are not alone. We're not alone because of groups like Grace that are there to support us, but we're also, more importantly, not alone because God is there. He knows the plan. He knows when we're going to land. He knows the amazing job he has in store for us. That never changes. Even when my faith waned or wavered a little bit or got shaken when it wasn't unfolding the way I wanted it to, God never wavered. And he did have something in store beyond anything that I could imagine. And so it is okay to promote ourselves, but not boastfully. Be humble, and Tactful, as Nancy will talk about, and God will bless you more than you can possibly imagine. So let me close this in prayer. Kind Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity this morning. Thank you for the speakers that are willing to give of their time. And thank you for all of the folks in job transition that are joining us, Lord. And I just ask that you will be with each of them, give them comfort and help them feel your presence. Please hear their prayers, both spoken and unspoken, and be there for every person here, Lord, and help them to understand your plan and your will and what you have in store, which is beyond anything that we can imagine, Lord. And we look forward to that in your heavenly name. Amen. Okay. Well, I'm going to share my screen, if that is okay, and we'll go through some of the resources that we have at Grace for you. And as I mentioned, when I was in job transition, I'd never been through it before, and I didn't really know what to expect. And I certainly didn't know that there were groups that helped people in job transition. And so Grace and other groups like Wooddale or Eastern Lutheran, or there's many groups that a number of you might participate in. If you're senior level executive, groups like Executives in Motion, that's designed specifically for director level and above senior executives. There are a lot of really wonderful resources out there. And so again, you are not alone. Today, other than when I'm finished, we will hear from Michael Hurley, and he's going to talk about why he helps lead the Crossroads Career Network. Usually we hear from somebody in job transition, but today we decided to mix it up a little bit. And Michael's been a wonderful volunteer at Grace, and so you're going to hear from him. And then our keynote speaker today, Nancy Burke, is amazing, and her message is so helpful. I found it incredibly helpful, not only in job transition, but beyond that, just in our work lives. And so you are in for a treat there, and then I'll wrap things up, and we're done. As I mentioned, Crossroads has 3 campuses that we have in-person meetings at when we're meeting in person. Both at Grace that I mentioned, and at Woodbury Lutheran, and which is in Woodbury, and Northern Heights Lutheran in Arden Hills. And so just stay on Grace Crossroads as for updates when we get back into person. When that occurs, those are the locations that will be. Also, make sure that you are on gracecrossroads.com. It is kind of the baseline of everything that we do. There's jobs, there's postings, communication amongst job seekers, a lot of great resources, events that we have upcoming. So always be tied into gracecrossroads.com for that important information. The other thing to keep in mind is that at Grace, from a resource standpoint, there are numerous resources. And first, there is Networking with Grace, which happens every Thursday from 9 until 11. So right after this meeting, it's run by Wes Roper and Wes Tang that do an amazing job. And it's one of the best networking groups I've ever been a part of. Really have people engaged, and I've very rare that anybody comes away from that group without some contacts at targeted companies that they're looking to land. So highly recommend that. Also, there's one-on-one coaching available too. So if you want to connect up with a coach that'll sit down with you and answer specific questions about your job search and what you want to do, and whether it's look at your resume or just talk about job search opportunities or what you want to do, could be anything. You can get signed up and get one-on-one counseling that way. We also have prayer support. We are big believers in prayer at Grace, and you can submit prayer requests through the website, and there are people actively praying for you and for your job search and for your needs and your frustrations. So don't hesitate to do that. And then there are online classes that you can get involved with. At Grace, we do an 8-week program that covers literally every single element of job search. And so if you are in job search for the first time like I was, or it's been a while since you've been in job search, look at the things that are covered. Literally everything that I had questions about or that I had uncertainty about is covered in these classes. And you go through with a smaller group, about 6 to 10 people, that you get to know a little bit, which is nice. And it's incredibly helpful. And you get a little accountability on a weekly basis. So there are classes starting every month. And so you can always join, and but highly recommend it. It's a great way to find out how you can get through job transition as quickly as possible. And then make sure you join the Crossroads LinkedIn group, Minnesota Crossroads Career Network. Do that today. That's your #1 goal. Hook up with that group before, if not before this presentation is over, right after, because it will help you connect with other people in job transition, and again, be tied in with different things that are going on at Grace. We also have a variety of additional resources, wonderful companies and individuals that help make this ministry, Grace Crossroads, possible. And I'm very proud that my company, Thrive Financial, has had a wonderful partnership with Grace Crossroads for a number of years. As a Christian company, we're a bit unique in that regard, and the largest not-for-profit on the Fortune 500. Something I'm very proud of. And Thrive does a lot to give back to the community, and certainly has identified Grace Crossroads as a wonderful resource that should be supported. And we are very proud to do so, among many other companies that help make Grace Crossroads and the resources that it offers possible. All right. A little slow here. The PowerPoint. Come on now. There we go. A lot of people involved in making this happen. Harry Urschel has built an incredible team at Crossroads, and these are just some of the people that are volunteering. Every person involved at Grace Crossroads is a volunteer, and they do it because of passion they have to help you. Either they've been through job transition like I have, and many of us have, or they just want to help. And so don't hesitate to reach out. Again, you're not alone. A lot of people there to help you. If you don't have a church home of your own, these 3 churches are the ones, again, that we are connected with as far as where we hold meetings. So don't hesitate to reach out. They do online streaming services, and are now starting to open up some in person. So don't hesitate to reach out there. So let me get back and stop my share. Technology is always fun, isn't it? There we go. Okay. So we will dive into our first person that I referenced, Mr. Michael Hurley. And as I mentioned, Michael is a volunteer at Grace. He is not in job transition, but we really thought it would be helpful and interesting to hear a little bit about why he does what he does. Michael, in his B job, when he's not volunteering at Grace, is a recruiter for Best Buy, but has led small groups at Grace for a long period of time, and does a phenomenal job and offers an amazing perspective as a recruiter. So let me turn it over to Michael for his thoughts, and really appreciate you being here, Michael. Good to see you this morning.
You too.
Michael, if you can unmute yourself.
There we go. How's that?
You're good.
How many times have people done that? You talk for 30 seconds and then you finally unmute. So thanks for having me, Skip. And thanks for all the folks that are on this morning. So I'll be fairly brief, but again, my career, just as a starting point, has been in recruiting for too many years, some people would say, but for 25 years plus, I've been in essence, in a recruiting role within corporate and consulting roles, as a headhunter, if you will, and working with all levels of companies, all levels of leaders, all levels of roles, many different functional disciplines, assessing talent, communicating feedback to managers as well as candidates, coaching the individuals on interviewing, coaching managers on interviewing, and I love it. I just, it's been just meeting so many people with so many different stories has just been amazing. And it's, I believe actually that how I landed in recruiting started long before my first recruiting role, certainly. And I would say it really was, I was blessed early on by a youth pastor of mine, a young life leader who did contact work in our high school. And he sought me out as well as other friends of mine, and just served us humbly, consistently, got to know us, and shared Christ with us, shared God's word, basically, that we were loved for who we were, not for what others thought of us, not for sports accolades or work or things in school, etc. And that in and of itself really touched me, his servant heart, and then certainly accepting Christ through that, it just changed my life personally and directionally. So starting as a youth pastor, some people find the next move interesting. I moved into a sales role. Those were my two options coming out of college. And I had some success there, and then decided I wanted to do something that had a little bit more of an idealistic bent to it. So I moved to a small college, worked with students, and worked on my master's in student development. And that basically ultimately led me to my first recruiting role here in the Twin Cities. And it's been, for me, it's just been a way to positively impact people's lives. As you know, I mean, our jobs are huge parts of our world, of our life, of our families. And this really has given me an opportunity, again, like I said, to meet so many different people, to walk them through assessments, to provide feedback, to watch people change and grow. Just all around interviewing, job transition work, again, has been what I've been doing for 20 some years. So working for as a volunteer for Crossroads was a huge blessing to me, because it's a volunteer role. I get to give back to the community. I get to share my faith and professional training. Basically, even having myself been through a job transition, it's a tough road. There's a lot of things to do, a lot of things to learn. And for me, again, I've been able to share my faith and the professional training I've had with a lot of people in Crossroads in different functions, either the one-on-one coaching or certainly primarily in small groups, which I've been working on, I think it's 7 to 8 years. But I really believe that kind of God laid that out for grace. Thankful to Dave Sparkman for getting it going. And it's just been a passion of mine. I think what I love about Crossroads is it offers just, again, that opportunity to serve our community, serve people in a tough time, guided by God's steady hand and his word, and specifically, working through some scripture in every group, devotions, prayer, all of that being sometimes a first exposure to that for folks, and sometimes going back to where we've been, and sometimes just an opportunity to consider, a new perspective, and specifically to consider who God made us to be, our gifts, our talents, our skills. And it just provides, the overall, specific to the small group arena, it provides just, if you will, a safe haven during a job transition, and a time where I've seen, and I know others certainly have, a lot of growth in themselves and a lot of exploration. that they may not have done before. As Skip had mentioned, he'd been in it, maybe hasn't been in a job transition of late, certainly, but I have over the years. Most of us have. And I guess what I'd say from a practical perspective is when you're in a job search, and I do this weekly and sometimes daily, I'm in feedback sessions, debriefing sessions with hiring leaders. And the one thing that stands out is it really doesn't have much to do with the person's specific experience, whether they move on to the next stage or whether they get that offer for the next role. It has very much to do with how prepared they are to tell their story. So again, with Crossroads, we work through a lot of different aspects of the job transition cycle, but for me, and even actually currently at Best Buy where I am now, managers often bring up that, gosh, I didn't hear any star stories from the individuals that we interviewed. We had people that had the background, but they didn't tell their story. They couldn't tell their story. They told it too long. It was too short. Didn't feel like it was organized. And then there's those that do. So for those of you who aren't familiar with STAR story, it's basically a situation, task, action, result scenario that you build using your experiences. But that delivery builds confidence and a connection. And again, working with Crossroads has allowed me to use the feedback that I get typically from managers and help folks hopefully through that process. So when you do, and you will, get those interviews, you'll be ready to go. And most people that I've talked to, had in my small groups, don't prepare and practice near enough. What in my small group, again, what I love about is we get, even now on Zoom, we get opportunities to do mock interviews, which tends to be oftentimes the least favorite time for a lot of the people in the group. But as I always tell them, it doesn't matter in the small group. It matters when you get out and you actually have an interview. So this is a time to practice, to flop, to work, to grow, etc. And I just tell people you have to be able to spend time reflecting on, again, who you are, who God made you to be, your skills, your talents, previous roles that have worked for you, and build that all into a story that's about you, that's, again, makes a connection. And the thing that I talk to my small groups about a lot is you have to practice and prepare and practice and prayer often and a lot and often and a lot. So that, if anybody's been in one of my small groups, that's what we spend a lot of time on. Another valuable part, I think, of Crossroads is I love the community that's been developed through the Crossroads small groups specifically, but just the networking meetings and meetings like this today. It certainly will be better when we get back together. But the connections that people make, the group support, the challenging of one another, sharing and caring, as a team in a small group, trying to move everybody toward a better place, a better grasp of knowledge and skills in order to basically soon to be celebrate a new opportunity. Christ has helped me through Crossroads, certainly, and I know many others, and has helped us understand, our value as a person. And again, with Crossroads, one of the things that I think is so important is, we talk about this, and again in my small group a lot, is your value as a person, not as an employee. Your value not based on your last performance appraisal. Your value not is based on your current status. It's who God made you to be, and how we can follow His direction and follow His guidance, follow His encouragement through His Word. So I love that about the small groups, and I know I've had feedback about that from many of the folks that I've worked with. And then one other part that people about Crossroads, I would say that that happens often is that people basically pay forward what they've learned through Crossroads, whether it be groups like this, the small groups, one-on-one coaching. It's just evident over the last, 6, 7, 8, 9 years that people are open and willing to help others. And going through Crossroads, people have been able to turn around and help others, refer people into Crossroads, help them expand their network, their connections, just provide fellowship and accountability in a transition time. And you are a huge part of the Crossroads ministry and an application of what Crossroads is all about. So, those are the things that I love about working with Crossroads is the practical aspect, helping people move to that next step, helping people get to know themselves better so they can present themselves better. The community, the pay it forward aspect. And I guess I would close just by just touching on a quick devotion that we use in our small group. And it's basically from Psalm 37, where the Bible says, to trust in God's timing, basically rest in the Lord, wait patiently for him to act. Don't fret and worry. It only leads to harm. And the story talks about, resting is basically an act of faith. It means you're waiting on God. When Jesus and the disciples were in the boat and they were caught in the big storm, Jesus kept sleeping right through all the ruckus. And the disciples were not sleeping and resting. They were basically freaking out, wondering if they were going to make it back to shore. And they woke Christ up and he said, "Why are you sleeping?" And then Christ said, "Do you think God is going to let the boat sink with me in it?" I love that. But by sleeping through the storm, Jesus basically showed us that we can trust him even in the middle of a storm or transition, if you will. And when we get in the storm, we tend to worry, but it's not time to worry, although that's easy to say. Time to rest in God and dive into his word, dive into his community, and not abandon it when things get tough. So that's what I would have to say about Crossroads. And that last part is part of what we talk about as well, is trying to find joy in the journey. Supporting each other through that, learning about each other, learning more about God. And I appreciate the time.
All right, thank you, Michael. And Michael's just an example of the many volunteers we have at Grace. And what a fantastic volunteer that he is, offering incredible experience as a recruiter and gives back repeatedly and has for years. So thank you, Michael, for sharing part of the reason why you do that. I also wanted to clarify, I'd referenced a couple times Grace Crossroads as far as the website and all that. And just to be clear, the website is Minnesota Crossroads, or mncrossroads.com. So just so we're clear as to the exact site, because we want to make sure you get it right, because there's a lot of good stuff there. So make sure you go there. But now, the moment we've all been waiting for. It is a pleasure for me to introduce Nancy Burke. Nancy is the founder of Burke and Penn, and she's a career coach and author of the book, Power Your Career, the Art of Tactful Self-Promotion. So that's the key word here. Unlike me, she's talking about being tactful. But something a lot of us struggle with is just self-promotion, just talking about ourselves. And it's so critical. And Nancy has written an amazing book talking about not only how important it is, but how to do it. And so you are in for a treat. And it is my pleasure to introduce you to Nancy Burke.
Thank you very much, Skip, and good morning. It's always a treat for me to be able to be on Crossroads, or to be at Crossroads. When I agreed to do this last spring, I thought for sure we would be in person by now, but obviously we're not, and we're moving on with our Zoom. So I appreciate being here and hope I can offer you some helpful words as others have. So I'm going to ask you a question first before I put slides up, and that is, is it fair to assume that because you're in job search, you have to sell yourself every day, that you're getting good at self-promotion? When I ask that question at the beginning of many conversations I have with people that are in job search, the answer is often a groan and no, I'm not so good. And you have a lot of company there. But I want to ask you a question, and you can actually, I'd like you to throw some words into the chat box. When you hear the term self-promotion, what words come to mind? Can you just, a few of you put a few words in there? Brag, braggart, I'm seeing, salesmanship, selling myself, marketing, confidence, value proposition, traits and skills, etc. And talking about your skills, claiming other people's works, articulate and confident selling, awareness. Okay, thank you for putting those in. There were more positive words there than I often see. There we go. Sorry about that. And so I am, I think that we normally see words like pushy and obnoxious and boastful in addition to bragging and braggart, because self-promotion makes many of us uncomfortable. And it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be something that you're uncomfortable with. And it's, even though it's not something a lot of us like to do, it's something we can learn to do. So let me tell you a story about how we got started with the whole idea of tactful self-promotion. My co-author, Richard Dotson, this is early in his career. He was working in Silicon Valley, walking with a coworker across the campus. And in Silicon Valley, everybody works in a campus as opposed to a building. They ran into their boss, Tim, and he said, "Hey guys, how is it going?" And Laura said, "It's great. We just finished the design of an interviewing skills workshop, and I think it's going to really help our clients get jobs faster. And we're going to be doing the beta test on Friday, but I'm really excited about it." Tim said, "Great. Let me know how it goes." Then he turned to Richard and said, "And how about you, Richard? And how are you doing?" And Richard said, "Fine." When Tim went on, Laura, being a good career coach, gave Richard a jab in the ribs and said, "Richard, how do you expect people to know what you're doing unless you tell them? How do you expect people to know what you're doing if you don't tell them?" Exactly. If you don't tell people, if you can't tell people what you're doing, if you can't promote what you are doing and who you are, you're going to miss out on jobs that you deserve. You're going to miss out on projects, on clients, promotions, and maybe even pay increases that you really well deserve. If you don't do it, no one else is going to do it for you. I always say that this is a yo-yo experience. You're on your own. And so you have to do your own self-promotion, which, as Skip said, is why it has to be done tactfully. So, the truth is, you're always promoting something. When you walk into a room, when you say something, you are promoting something. The question is always in my mind, are you doing something that is helpful to yourself and to your career? So Richard and I have literally worked with thousands of people over the last many years, and we've put together a model that I think is helpful. And I'm trying to get there we go. It's a three-part model. The first one is positioning yourself. People need to know what you stand for. You need to be able to articulate your value and your brand in a way that catches people's ears. Maybe not in the way that Skip did it at the beginning, where he talked about how good looking he was, but it has to be in a way that people remember it. The second one is cultivating strategic relationships. That's a word other than networking, but it is about building a robust set of relationships, because we influence primarily through our relationships. My question is always, do you have them with the right people? And how are you going to build them with more people that are going to be able to be helpful to you and you'll be helpful to them as well. And then, whoops, we're going to go back one here. The third one, which the slide is not here right now, is increasing constructive visibility. You need to be able to build a reputation beyond people that you can personally meet. So we're going to spend most of our time on these first two, positioning yourself and cultivating strategic relationships. I'll touch a little bit on the increasing your visibility beyond your own network. And I'll focus on a few very specific topics. My intention is to give you practical ideas that everyone can use. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. In fact, it usually is fairly simple. It just takes moments and being prepared for the moments. And the word prepare, you're going to hear me say a couple of different times, because this is something that if you're prepared, you can pull this off without having to invest a whole lot of time. So, Laura and Richard spent the same 20 seconds or 30 seconds with the boss. What did the boss know about Laura? He knew a lot of things about what she was working on. He saw her enthusiasm. And what did he know about Richard? He knew Richard was fine. So it was that same 20 seconds, but what a contrast in what they were able to do. So in fairness to Richard, he could have been worse. We all have habit of, if you think about yourself at the coffee machine or hanging around with people, which we don't do as much of anymore. But when people say, well, how is it going? You know, people complain about the number of meetings. Maybe they complain about Zoom, how many Zoom meetings we have now. They complain about their job search. So we have a habit, you know, when we say, how's the job search going? So I think complaining may sound a little bit familiar to you. It's way too common. Instead of positioning ourselves as enthusiastic, positive, and being able to talk about how we add value, we allow ourselves to be seen as downers way too often. And to illustrate that, let me tell you a true story from a few years ago when our book first came out. We were sitting in the back of a room getting ready to present, and we had our little pile of books there, and a young man came by and said, wow, you wrote a book. That must be really exciting. And my immediate reaction, and I unfortunately did this, I said, oh, I'll tell you, pushing the end of this book across that finish line was so hard. And now we have to go out and sell and market it, which is even more challenging. Well, Richard learned how to coach. He gave me a jab in the ribs and said, Nancy, people don't want to buy a book on self-promotion from somebody who's complaining. And I tell you this because even though we have written the book, we kind of know what it takes. All of us slip into this habit way too often. So this is your habit. This is the time that you can replace this with something else. And we're going to work on how to put a few tools in your toolkit in very shortly. As I said, we're always promoting something. Do you want to promote, be a downer? Do you want to say fine? Or do you want to say great, like Laura? I think it's pretty easy to say which one you'd like to show up as most of the time. So let's kind of unpack what Laura did in that interaction with the boss, Tim. I think you'll agree she wasn't over the top. I think she was pretty appropriate in how she promoted herself and her work. And what did she do? She had, excuse me, energy and enthusiasm. She knew what was important to the boss and the organization. If you're designing career centers, one of the things you want is to have clients get jobs quickly as possible. She knew that was important to the boss and to the organization. And so she put that right in her statement. And most importantly, she was ready. She knew that she wanted to say something that was pretty clear on what she was working on. And you can't assume, even if you work closely with your boss, you can't assume that he or she always knows what you're working on. So as we move on to positioning yourself, we're going to talk about two major topics here. One is sharing your accomplishments and learnings, like Laura did. And the second one is we're going to be talking about how to, a positioning statement. You might call it an elevator speech, not my favorite term, but we're going to talk about putting together a statement that you use. So when you are talking about your accomplishments and learnings, you're telling people what you're doing or what you're learning. You're not doing this to brag. You're just talking about what you're doing with enthusiasm. So let me ask you another question. What's the question you get most often when you're in a job search? Anybody want to put that in the chat box? What's the question you get asked most often in your job search? And I am not able to see the chat box right now. So we're going to go on without the chat box for the time being. So a lot of people will say, I want to, tell me about yourself. And obviously you get that question a lot, but the most frequent question that you get is, how's the job search going? And so the question is, well, how do you answer that question? A lot of people, and let their hair down, especially when they're with friends. How's it going? And you can talk about how hard it is to get people to respond to your emails or to your phone calls. And as I think Skip said at the beginning, this can be a grind, and we know how challenging it is to be in a job transition. So when you are when you are asked, how's the job search going? You want to be ready. This is something you can really be prepared for, because you're going to get this question at least once or twice a day. If you're out there doing the kind of networking that you need to be doing, you're going to get this question quite frequently. And the question is, what do you say when people ask you, how's the job search going? What I'd like you to do is take a minute and just jot down what you typically say, or maybe what you might say once you've heard me talk about Laura and what she was talking about. So if you would take a minute and just jot that down on a piece of paper, and I'm going to see how I can get the chat box. Oops. Here we go. So you are writing things down while I'm trying to get this straightened out. I've got a problem here. So I'm going to go back to my, I'm going to use this format because I'm having trouble the other way. So I wish we could have people putting this up on the screen, but if you put something positive, great. You can mention, one of the things you want to do is when you see people are going, how is your search going? It's going very well. One of the tips that I've heard is, I'm just where I thought I would be. Okay, then you can tell them where you are. If you can talk about, I'm in the midst of doing a lot of networking. I'm getting closer to my target companies. That is a good thing to do. What you want to do, in addition to being positive and enthusiastic, is say something that also maybe highlights something you're learning or something you're in your professional skills. So, for example, you might say, I'm taking classes on something you're doing professionally, something in your own profession, and talk about something that you're learning that's very applicable to the next kind of job you want. You can talk about what you're learning from your networking. I'm learning a lot more about the new trends in whatever your industry or your profession is. So you can also say something positive about, well, you know, it's great, and I'm really excited. I'm going on vacation. We're taking a trip to whatever, although people aren't doing that so much these days. But I think it's a lot more helpful to you if you are talking about people who are talking about things that are applicable to your professional life in ways that are enthusiastic. You aren't going to be, you don't want to go on in any length. You want it to be probably a 10 to 20 second response about how it's going, but you want to be able to say something specific that's going to show people that you're involved with your profession. So the point is, you need to be prepared and be ready for that question. And it's one you're getting all the time, so why wing it every time that somebody asks you the question? It is being prepared. One of the things I learned from a client, and this is now going on probably 15 to 20 years ago, this person was, she'd been gotten a very generous severance package back in the days when you're getting more generous severance package. And she spent probably 6 months just kind of decompressing and regrouping, and then jumped into her job search after 6 months. And at that point, she started interviewing. And so when she was really interviewing with hiring managers, she was 10 to 11 months out of her job. So, you know, one of the questions she got was, well, what have you been doing in the time since you left XYZ company? And her response, which I have a recommendation that you use this in some situations, that she said, well, I set 5 goals for myself when I left my company. One was, of course, everybody has the exercise. One was to take some courses in finance so I could manage my own finances better. And here's what's happened. One was to take a half a day a week and read outside of my own field. I go to Barnes & Noble once a week and I read for a half a day. And so she had 5 goals. So you're maybe didn't do that at the moment you left your company, but you probably had some goals. So you can do a little bit of revisionist history, and you can say, you know, when I left my company, I had a number of goals, including, and this can be things like taking a class, sharpening up a particular kind of skill. You can, you know, you can say, I always wanted to be a room parent for my kids' school, and this has given me a chance to get more involved in my kids' education. Again, now this is a different world we're in. So we are you know, we have, you're probably all, if you have children in school, you're probably doing that at home. So that's another good thing to be talking about. So it's a, you know, it's a chance to, now this was during an interview that she did it, but I think it's a great thing to be able to talk about it, because you can be enthusiastic, you can talk about your things that are passionate and of interest to you. And I think it's a great idea for being able to show what what you are good, what you're enjoying, what you're good at. Now, there are times when saying fine is just fine. You have to kind of read the situation. You can't always go into what you're doing. It may be a casual conversation out on the street when you're walking, but it's not a time to be talking about the challenges of job search. That's what support groups like Grace and Crossroads are for, are to be able to have people you can let your hair down with and be able to talk about how you're really feeling. But when you're out there in the world and you're talking with people, you want to be able to talk about, enthusiastically talk with people about it and say what you're doing. So I am still having trouble finding the chat box. And so I'm going to try this thing one more time, see if we can get back to a slideshow, and we're not. So we're just going to live with this. And I won't be able to hear from you, but we'll go with that. So I hope that kind of answered a few questions for you. I will say that sharing your accomplishments and learnings is a key part of how you promote yourself. The second part is your value proposition. What do you want to be known for? Now, I know that if you've been in any kind of a job search group, you have been working on some kind of a statement, your value proposition, your branding statement, your elevator speech. I think elevator speech, I don't like the term speech, because this should be something that starts a conversation. And you want to be able to have it conversational. And so it really is being able to talk about it in a way that generates conversation with other people. Now, I also say that you probably want to have a 10, a 20, and a 60-second version of this. A 10-second one for a very casual conversation. Maybe you're out walking in your neighborhood. This could be a cocktail party. So something that is very catchy and something that you can spill out that is very, really grabs people's ears, that is they can talk about. The 20-second one is for maybe a networking meeting. It's a little bit more serious. You can talk a little bit longer. And then the 60-second one is for the front end of an interview when you get asked, why don't you tell me a little about yourself? You want to be prepared with all three of those versions, because there are lots of different situations you're going to find yourself in if you are actually doing the kind of networking that you ought to be doing. So a few tips. The first thing is, what value do you add to clients and customers? So think of what your value add is. So I just had a client write something like, well, I really thrive on building good relationships with my coworkers, etc. Well, that's great. That's a great attribute. But I want to know, as a result of that, what value is he adding to the organization that he works for, or to his customers' organizations? What are your unique gifts and talents? I could look at a whole lot of different people and see, if I looked at 10 accountants, every accountant would be bringing something different to the job than other people. So what you want to do is think about, and you often will need to help from people that you used to work for. Find out, what is it that you bring to your job that's, unique to you? So how have you used those to make a contribution to your organization? And what differentiates for you from your peers? Because you are different and you do have different gifts. And that's usually what you can get very enthusiastic about. So here's a few guidelines. You want to use very simple language, 8th grade words. We don't want to use a lot of words like leverage and strategic, et cetera, et cetera. You want to use plain language. I always say my mother should be able to understand what you're doing. It should be tapping into the listener's wants. That is, if you are talking to a hiring manager, for example, you want to be able to have the hiring manager, you want to be able to talk in a way that that it taps into something that he or she is really interested in for this job. It needs to be conversational. It shouldn't sound like a speech. It should be informal. It should convey your passion and energy. And if you've put this thing together right, that will come through. It won't sound like something that you're just reciting off a page that you wrote on. Using vivid language and words, and I'll give you an example in a few minutes. And it should be something repeatable, especially those 2 short ones, the 10-second one, because you want people to be able to say, oh, I just heard about somebody like that, and be able to repeat what you said to them. So what I want you to do, and this is going to be hard because we can't, I can't get much feedback from you the way this is working right now, or the way I'm working it. So I'll give you an example first. You know, if this were Laura, for example, in the Laura in the example I started with, and we talked about hers, and she worked in a career center in Silicon Valley. Hers might be, I work with people who want to find a good job as quickly as possible and make sure they have fun in the process. That tells you a little bit about how it might be to work with Laura. There might be somebody else who says, I work with people who are looking for work and I help them get jobs as quickly as possible. Or I help people find their right place in the workforce. Those are all 3 people that might have a very similar job, but they approach their job in a very different way. So you also, some people get tempted to use a title. Well, I'm a director of marketing at XYZ company. Well, that doesn't tell me much about you. So we really recommend not using your title almost ever when you're talking about your what you're doing. So you can talk about it from a problem focus. You know, when people are having trouble with making their Zoom work, well, I help people set up technology so that it works perfectly every time. That could be your short 10-second value proposition. So here's one from a client that we had who was an OD consultant. And the first one is, when we started working with her, I'm an OD consultant who structures synergy between organization silos to create multifunctional alignment, producing high engagement cultures that produce good results. Now, if you were to rate this on the ugh, fine, or great scale, I think you'd probably say ugh. I would. And the reason is, first of all, a lot of you don't even know what an OD consultant is. So using jargon like that, even it's a title, it could be meaningful to somebody in human resources, but it's not going to be meaningful to a lot of people. So you don't want to use a title with jargon. And then, of course, it was full of jargon, words like synergy and silos and that kind of thing. So we worked with her, and she came back, and the next one was, I'm an OD consultant who partners with senior leaders to create high engagement cultures. So what does this one rate? It's certainly better, not too exciting. So to increase the impact and memorability of what she did, we said, okay, let's work on this. And so what she came up with was, I help companies create workplaces where people can't wait to get there in the morning and they don't want to leave at night. Now that's something that most of us remember. Then you can add some outcomes about retention or productivity. But you can see, instead of reciting something that sounds like part of a job description full of jargon, she spoke to people in simple language. I help companies create workplaces where people can't wait to get there in the morning and they don't want to leave at night. Does that grab your ears? For most people, it does. And it is really something that's interesting, and it would generally lead to questions. Wow, I'd like to know what kind of companies those are, or how in the world do you do that? That's what you want to get from a question, from a statement like that, is getting a conversation going. So what I'd like you to do is just take a couple of minutes, and you don't have to write the whole thing, but what I want you to do, and we aren't going to have, we're not in a situation where we can share a lot of this, but I want you to be able to put some words down to start with, to give yourself a memory jog when you're back on your own, to say, you know what, I probably ought to be talking about this when I'm talking about my branding or my positioning, my value proposition. So just take a couple seconds and do that. And I'm going to take a drink and get my throat watered here. Okay, and again, you're going to get this question a lot. You're going to get it questioned in the informal way, like, when you're at a party, a virtual party, or out on the street walking. You're going to get asked when you network with people. You need to be able to have a vivid way to describe yourself that you can deliver with some energy and enthusiasm, because you'll believe it. And it's really yours. Now, this is not something you can do in 10 minutes. You can't even really do it in a 1-hour workshop on putting your value proposition together. This takes work, but it's worth it because you're going to use it so much. So one person that I know who helps people with this says you have to write 50 versions of it, particularly that short one, before you find one that's really going to be what you want to say. So it's valuable because you're going to do this a lot. Okay? So, cultivating strategic relationships. It's great to know your value proposition and be able to talk about your accomplishments, but if you don't have anyone to talk with it about, it's not going to work so well. And if no one but you knows about how you say it, it's not very helpful. So that's why the whole strategic relationships, the networking, building a network is very important. There's no question that developing a network is crucial to your success, both when you're in a job search, but also for your career overall. Why? Because we make things happen through our relationships. We know that people do business with people that they know, like, and trust. Know, like, and trust. So you have to get to know people. And you can do that in short meetings. And I'm sure most of you have read Marsha Ballinger's book, The 20-Minute Networking Meeting. If you haven't, get it and read it. So in 20 minutes, you can actually build relationships. One more reason that it's important to be doing this is there's research that people who have good networks make more money. It kind of makes sense, but until you think about it. So what other reason? If for no other reason but that, I think you want to be doing that. You want to make sure that you're working on your network. And I know all of you know you need to build a network. But when I ask people, who's really kind of good at this, who feels that they're doing what they need to be doing, very few hands go up. We typically know we should be doing it, but we don't do it as often as we should. And so my question is, why don't we do as much networking as we should? And I'm going to ask you that. And unfortunately, I can't get your responses. But there are 4 reasons. There are 4 major reasons that we see why people don't network as much or as well as they should. The first one is a mindset. people feel like they have to be pushy. First of all, having a mindset, you first of all have to believe this is important and critical. If you don't believe that, it's going to be pretty darn hard to network. It's probably one of the most important things you're going to do. But if you think about it as selling, I've got to go sell myself. I've got to go push myself on other people. It's very hard if that's how you think about it. And it's particularly hard. I'm an introvert, and it's particularly hard for me to think about doing this if I'm thinking I'm pushing myself. So instead of a sales kind of thing, and I'm thinking about the worst kind of sales, think about it as research. This is research. And so if you're going out there to do research, you're going out to network with a genuine sense of curiosity, as opposed to having to convince people on how good you are. And let's face it, you really are researching. You are trying to learn about the marketplace, about the industry that you want to go into, about your profession. You have a lot to learn. And so you always have questions, and think about it as research. That's absolutely critical. And let me just give you an example. One of the people in our book, Natasha, she was a marketing director in a company, in a large global company. And she was really hitting her head against the glass ceiling. She wasn't getting ahead. And then there was an international assignment for an international marketing person, and she was really hoping to get it. And she did not. She was turned down for the job. And because basically no one outside of her own boss knew her all that well. So she determined that before the next kind of job came open, she was going to become known by the kinds of people that make decisions on those big assignments. So she got the support from her boss, and she decided she was going to write an article. And she decided to start with their own company newsletter. They had an online newsletter. And she also approached a professional association to see if they would be interested. So she decided to write an article on what else? How to prepare for an international assignment. So with the boss, she talked about what she wanted to do, and he gave her the go-ahead and actually helped with giving her the names and introducing her to a couple of the key senior people outside of their area. So she did some really good research. She knew what she was talking about. And then she approached probably 6, 8 senior leaders in that organization outside of her own area and asked if she could interview them and about preparing for an international assignment. And so when she went in, she wasn't just going in and saying, can we have coffee? I'd like to get to know you better. She was going in there with a mission. She was doing research, and she had some really good strategic questions planned. So she was able to have very comfortable conversations with people on business topics. This is something that you can do. All of you can do. You could write an article for your professional journal or your professional newsletter. Newsletters are always looking for articles. You can do that, and you can approach people in that mind, but you don't have to. But if you think about it as researching, you can put together some really good strategic questions so that you can have a good conversation. So then in her case, she was able to go back to these people once she'd read the article and develop the relationships further by sharing the draft of what she was doing or going back and getting quotes from them. So that she's one person who's a really good example of somebody who decided to really get to know people who are much more senior. And that's the question a lot of people have is, I don't have a relationship, I don't have a network with the right level people. Well, one way you can do that is by saying you're going to write something. And there's always outlets. Believe me, there's always outlets for that. So having the right mindset of research rather than pushy sales is the key, I think, the foundation of being good at networking. Okay, the second one is having a goal and a strategy. What's the purpose for your getting out there? And it should be very clear when you're meeting with people, what's the goal? So if you think about your job search, when I talk to people who are working and aren't looking for a job, I say, think out a year. Who should you know that you don't know now? Or who should you know better than you know now, in order to think about the next kind of career move you want to make? In your case, a year is way too long. And so you probably want to think about, if you look out 60, 90 days, who should you know that you don't know now? That might include, for example, in your field, let's just say your field is marketing and you're looking in the Twin Cities. Who are some of the key marketing leaders in your profession who are, or in your industry, that you would want to get to know? So it might be senior people in your profession or senior people in your industry. It might include, it should and probably will include people in your own company. People at the company that you used to work for, that were very good at what they did and well known and often well connected. It probably will be search people. You should have a number of search people who know you better. It might be people who are running professional organizations. So if you're an accountant, I'm assuming you would belong to a couple of accounting groups, and you would want to get to know the people that are running those groups, because often, while they might not be senior, they probably are pretty well connected. So you want to think ahead. Who should you be meeting with? Who should know you? That's the question. Who should you get to know you if you're really looking? So you can divide your network into kind of 3 buckets. You can do it lots of different ways. And this way, you want to look at your network in terms of acquaintances. These are people that you know, maybe people you've worked with, neighbors, soccer parents, people at church, just acquaintances. People on LinkedIn, a lot of LinkedIn are not strong links to you, but they are acquaintances. Allies, these are people that you know you a little bit better. They could speak on your behalf, perhaps, because they know a little bit about your work. And then advocates. Advocates are people who really will go to bat for you, sometimes even without your asking. Now, at the stage of your career, a lot of you are, you should have, I would guess if you started listing them, you probably have between 200 and 500 people in your network if you really think about this. The majority are going to be acquaintances. Many fewer will be allies, and really you're going to have a handful of advocates, somewhere between maybe 10, 15 people that are really, really people you can keep going back to for help. What you want to do in your networking is, first of all, build acquaintances. You want to expand from the people that you know to people that you don't currently know. You want to deepen allies, deepen some of those relationships, so you can look at that list and say, who should I be going back to and really getting to know better? And then you need to nurture those advocates. They're in the book, Power Your Career. There are a whole lot of ideas about how you might do each of those, which is beyond the scope that we can do today. So the question is, who should you know, and who should you know better than you do currently? So, oops, went backwards here. Okay. So who should get to know better? So, I'm going to back up one. What I would suggest you do is make a list of everybody that's in your network. And I think a lot of you probably have done that, but if you haven't, and I'm surprised sometimes when I run into people, they don't have an organized way to do that. You should have it. You can divide it into acquaintances, allies, and advocates, but you want to have a plan. Rather than just kind of reacting, oh, I saw an ad, oh, I better work on that company, I better meet some people in that company. You want to do that anyway, but you also want to have a strategy and a goal for how you're going to do this. Okay. If we talk about who you should get to know, I want to share a little bit about what we've done. I used to work at Lee Hecht Harrison, whom some of you might be working with. And years ago, we did research. They did research. So people would always ask, well, how long is a job search going to take? And of course, if you knew how long it would take, that would make this whole time a lot easier for you. I know that not knowing when the end might be is very stressful and anxiety producing. I get that. But one of the things we checked on is sort of what did it take? And so we started looking at, it's not the length of time, it is the kind of activity. And specifically, we found in that research, and it was done nationally, that it's the number of people, it's the key metric in how long your search is going to be is how many hiring managers you have talked to. Now, these are not necessarily hiring managers that have a job open. These are people that would have the decision-making authority to hire you in the kind of job that you're looking for. So think for a minute, how many do you think that is? And I'll tell you, because we won't have a conversation about this, that we found that in that study, they found that people on the average spoke to between 28 and 30 hiring managers before they got a job offer. Now, these are people that are in the area where they could hire you. So if you think about that and you think about it's really getting to that right person and it's getting to be the numbers so that you want to look at, okay, 28 hiring managers, how many people do you have to talk to in order to get to a hiring manager? It's a lot. That's why you have a lot of time now, so you can do a lot of talking with people. But we found that it probably takes between about 250 conversations to get to those 28 to 30 hiring managers. So then you can sort of gauge, okay, what do I have to do every week if I want to get to that many hiring managers? It's a lot. And I don't want to discourage you, but a friend of mine, about 6 months ago, a friend of mine whom I helped, probably 12 to 15 years ago, she's a lawyer and she left her organization. And she wanted to make a transition into the nonprofit world. So she said, okay, I said to her, she told me this recently, I didn't remember this. She told me that I would have to work, that she would have to talk with 250 people before she got into a nonprofit. And by the way, she did. She's worked for a couple of different nonprofits. But she said, you know what, I just went back and counted. I don't know why she did that, but she did. I just went back and counted how many people I talked to, and the number was 240. So I don't want to overwhelm you right now, but if you've been in the search a while, you know this is a numbers game. It's both quantity and quality, and you can't trade off one for the other. So, and this is building genuine mutual relationships where you show genuine interest in people and you also offer to help them. So that is a key thing to remember. So we are going on to here. I am having a bit of computer problems here. Advancing the slides. All right, so I hope that you understand having a goal and a strategy, and that is how are you going to, what do you want to do? The tactics we're not going to spend a lot of time on, but Do you know how to have a good conversation with someone? Do you have good conversation openers? For introverts, that's always a trick. I know that. And so I have mine prepared. I know how to ask people a question to start a conversation. This is especially tricky when you're in a large group. It's sort of, how do you strike up a conversation? We actually have 2 or 3 pages of questions that that are suggestions, but have something that works. Have it in your back pocket, have 3 or 4 questions that you can ask people to start that shows an interest in them. Why did you decide to join this group? Is this your first meeting here? And be prepared. Again, being prepared, because these situations are you're going to face a lot. And then finally, this is the list I was going to have you do. I had these in the wrong order. So cultivating your network. And then I suggest that you put a plan of action together for the next maybe a couple of weeks. Who are 3 people that you want to deepen a relationship with? Who are they specifically, and how are you going to do that? And then below is make a plan to start a relationship with 2 people. And I think if you're in a job search, it should be probably a lot more than 2 people, or people you don't know well, or people you don't know at all. Who are the people, like head of marketing at a certain company, and how are you going to go about connecting with that person? The last question, this is often the first one that people mention, and that is, I don't have the time. When you're in a job, it is hard to find that extra time. And I think that I understand that, because people are working full bore out, but this is a priority. If you think about something long-term and strategic, making sure that you're taking care of your career, now that you're out of a job, you know how critical it is to take care of that when you're in a job. I'm always surprised that people, they do so much work to develop a really good network when they're in transition, and they always say, I'm going to keep this going. And yet when they get in a job, it's overwhelming. And so the networking goes out the window, and then you're going to find another time you need to go back to it. And it's harder if you haven't maintained it. So I don't have the time. We know that you can create a network and build a network in a way that is very healthy in about 4 hours a month. And I think that's an hour a week, which is not a small amount of time, but you don't have to do this during prime working time hours either a lot of times, because it may involve starting with emails, etc. So on our website, which is tactfulselfpromotion.com, there are 2 free downloadable resources. One of them is a networking plan for a year. That is, how do you go about a systematic way to go about doing this? And then for those of you who want to get something going faster, we have the Fast Start Networking Guide. Those, you can go on the website and get those. You can certainly buy the book, would love that. But we can, you can go back and do that on the website, and it is no charge. So I'm not going to talk about increasing your visibility, except I want to tell you the end of Natasha's story. She did build her network of senior clients in her company, senior executives within her company, and she did actually get an international assignment. She decided that she was going to write the article. She approached a professional association, as I said. Once she came back from her international assignment, she decided that she wanted to maybe expand, maybe she would make a change eventually. And so she decided to get ready for a bigger job. Maybe she'd go out on her own as a consultant. So she tried writing another article, a more current one on trends in the industry. She gave it to her professional assignment, and then she put her professional newsletter, and then she pitched a national association to see if she could speak at a conference. And she actually interviewed, she said she would do a panel with some of the senior people that she'd gotten to know by writing the article. And so she ended up being a moderator on a panel of very senior people who said they'd be willing to come to the conference and speak. And then the following year, she actually was asked to speak on her own. So, I mean, that sounds like a fairy tale to some people, but it's actually very doable. So I would like to just suggest that there are a lot of different ways you can increase your visibility. You can, you know, really leverage how you use meetings and conferences, and we have a chapter in the book on that. Getting involved in professional associations, I'm assuming you're doing that. Make a presentation, publish an article. I can tell you that's a challenge, but it's absolutely doable. Articles are and blogs are actually pretty easy, and you do it with someone else. I wrote a book with somebody because I don't think I would have gotten it done on my own. So find somebody else that wants to work on it. It's a lot more fun. So making use of conferences, showing up online. So this is an outline of kind of some of the ways to do it. We talked about crafting talking about your accomplishments, learnings, crafting your value proposition, getting your mindset right, expanding standing relationships, etc. So you can be seen as a thought leader. I don't do this because sometimes it's pretty challenging to think about being a thought leader, but you can start by finding somebody to write an article with you. So power your career. You can go to the website. You can get, we do a newsletter from time to time, or you can follow us on Twitter. And the most important thing is be ready and take action. Thanks very much. And my email is nancy.burke100 at gmail.com, nancy.burke100 at Since we didn't get a chance to interact today, if you have questions, feel free to email me, and good luck to you in your careers.
Thank you so much, Nancy. What a great presentation. And I know I took a bunch of notes, so I hope you did too. And my suggestion would be pick 3. I know I've got a lot more than that, but pick 3 things that you took away, and maybe circle one in particular, one thing in particular that you want to implement today. I know a lot of times I hear great presentations and hear all these great ideas, and then I never get to any of them. So why don't you highlight 3 things that you learned from Nancy, and then pick one of them for sure that you want to make sure you implement, or at least start implementing today. And thanks also to Michael Hurley for his message, and what a great resource as a coach here at Grace, and sharing his wisdom as a recruiter from Best Buy. Just so you know that a recording will be made available of this webinar, and it'll be posted at the bottom of the seminars page of our website. And again, that is minnesotacrossroads.com. And you will also receive an email tomorrow with links to many of the things that we talked about today. And be sure that you, again, check out the website for more information on the 8-week classes, of which Michael Hurley is one of the coaches, and there are a number of others starting every week, or every month, new ones. Networking every Thursday morning. We're going to be starting here at 9 o'clock with Networking with Grace from 9 to 11. One-on-one coaching that you can sign up for, prayer support. And the next presentation is going to be this Thursday evening at 7 p.m. That is October 8th. George Dow is speaking on 9 choices, strategies, and stories for your next career move. So will be an excellent presentation. Hope you found this one beneficial. Join us again, and we'll look forward to seeing you down the road at Grace Crossroads. Have a good rest of the day.